Hello everyone, welcome to Sinister Prime. Since many of you listen to these stories to relax and drift off into dreams, I thought it would be wonderful to hear where you're tuning in from around the world. Let's begin the story. I work the night shift at a small convenience store. It's a boring job, but the pay is decent, and the hours work well with my lifestyle. I'm a night owl by nature, so working from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. suits me just fine. Most nights are uneventful. I restock shelves, clean the bathrooms, and occasionally ring up a customer or two. I pass the time by reading, listening to music, or just zoning out. It's a pretty sweet gig, all things considered. But one night, everything changed. It started out like any other shift. I clocked in at 10 p.m. sharp, did my usual rounds, and settled in behind the counter with a book. Around 1 a.m., a young woman came in. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with long dark hair and pale skin. She was wearing a short black dress and heavy eye makeup. I recognized her as a regular. She came in a few times a week, always looking a little worse for wear.
"Hey, Ethan. Can I get a pack of Marlboros and a lighter?"
she said, her voice raspy.
"Sure thing, Leela,"
I replied, grabbing the cigarettes and a disposable lighter from behind the counter. Lila was a local girl who had fallen on hard times. I'd heard rumors that she was a prostitute, but I tried not to judge. Everyone has their own struggles. As I rang up her purchase, I noticed a nasty bruise on her arm.
"You okay?"
I asked, nodding towards the bruise. Lila quickly pulled her sleeve down, covering it.
"Yeah, I'll fine. Just clumsy, you know?"
She forced a smile, but I could see the pain in her eyes. I wanted to press further, to ask if she needed help, but I knew it wasn't my place.
"Well, you take care of yourself out there, all right?"
I said, handing her the cigarettes and lighter.
"Always do."
She replied, giving me a wink before heading out the door. I watched her go, a strange feeling of unease settling in my stomach. Something just didn't feel right, but I pushed it aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. Lila was a big girl. She could take care of herself. The rest of the shift passed uneventfully. Around 5 a.m., a group of college kids came in, stocking up on snacks and energy drinks before their early morning classes. I chatted with them briefly, enjoying the change of pace. But by 6 a.m., they were gone and I was alone again. As I was counting the till and getting ready to clock out, I heard a noise coming from the back of the store. It sounded like a muffled scream. My heart raced as I grabbed a baseball bat from behind the counter and slowly made my way towards the sound. I pushed open the door to the storage room, bat raised, and froze at the sight before me. Lila was lying on the floor, her dress torn and bloodied. A large man was on top of her, his hands around her throat. They both turned to look at me, shock and terror etched on their faces.
"What the fuck?"
I yelled, raising the bat higher. The man scrambled off of Lila and lunged towards me. I swung the bat with all my might, connecting with his shoulder. He howled in pain and stumbled backwards.
"Call the cops!"
I shouted at Lila, who was curled up on the floor, gasping for air. She nodded weakly, and I turned my attention back to the man. He was clutching his injured shoulder, glaring at me with pure hatred.
"You're gonna regret that, you little shit,"
he growled, taking a step towards me. I swung the bat again, this time hitting him square in the face. He went down hard, blood gushing from his nose. I stood over him, bat raised, ready to strike again if he moved. But he just lay there, moaning in pain. I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. The cops must have gotten Lila's call. Within minutes, the store was swarming with police officers. They quickly apprehended the man, who I later learned was named Damien. He was a known pimp and drug dealer with a long rap sheet. Lila was taken to the hospital to be treated for her injuries. I gave my statement to the cops, explaining what had happened. They commended me for my quick thinking and bravery, but I didn't feel like a hero. I felt sick to my stomach, replaying the horrific scene in my mind over and over again. I took a few days off work to process everything, but when I returned, I found myself constantly on edge. Every noise made me jump. Every customer made me wary. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting to strike. A few weeks later, I was working another late shift. It was around 3 a.m. and the store was empty. I was restocking the cooler when I heard a noise behind me. I whirled around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. I shook my head, telling myself I was being paranoid. As I turned back to the cooler, I froze. Damien was standing there, a twisted grin on his face.
Hello, Ethan.
He said, his voice dripping with menace.
Miss me?
I stumbled backwards, my back hitting the cooler.
How? How did you get out?
Damien chuckled.
I have my ways, and now it's time for payback.
He lunged at me, his hands closing around my throat. I struggled against his grip, gasping for air. Spots danced in my vision as I clawed at his hands, trying to pry them off. Just when I thought I was going to pass out, Damien released his grip. I fell to the floor, coughing and wheezing. He stood over me, a sadistic gleam in his eyes.
I'm not going to kill you, Ethan,
He said, crouching down beside me.
That would be too easy. No, I'm going to make you suffer. I'm going to take everything from you, just like you took from me.
He grabbed a handful of my hair, yanking my head back.
Starting with your precious Leela.
He hissed in my ear.
What are you going to do to her?
I asked, my voice trembling. Damien grinned.
You'll see, but don't worry, I'll make sure you're there to watch.
He released his grip on my hair and stood up.
See you around, Ethan. Sweet dreams.
With that, he turned and walked out of the store, leaving me shaking on the floor. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. I had to warn Lila, to protect her from this monster. But how? I finally pulled myself together and called the cops. I told them everything that had happened, about Damien's threats and his escape from prison. They assured me they would increase patrols in the area and keep an eye on Lila. But as the days passed, I grew more and more anxious. Damien was still out there, and he was after Lila. I tried to convince her to go into hiding, to leave town for a while, but she refused, insisting that she could take care of herself.
I'm not going to live in fear. Ethan, I've been through too much already. I'm not running away from some psycho.
I admired her courage, but I was terrified for her. I begged her to at least stay with me for a while, but she wouldn't hear of it.
I appreciate it, Ethan, but I'm not going to put you in danger too. I'll be fine, I promise.
I wanted to argue, to force her to see reason, but I knew it was no use. Lila was as stubborn as she was brave. All I could do was keep an eye on her, make sure she got home safe after her shifts at the club. One night, as I was walking Lila to her car after her shift, I had a strange feeling that we were being watched. I scanned the dark parking lot, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end.
You okay, Ethan?
Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired, that's all.
Lila nodded, but I could tell she didn't quite believe me. We reached her car and I watched as she got in and started the engine. As she pulled out of the parking lot, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was being paranoid. But as the days passed, it only grew stronger. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every noise. I couldn't shake the feeling that Damien was out there watching, waiting. Then, one night, my worst fears were realized. I was working the late shift, alone in the store, when the door burst open. Lila stumbled in, her clothes torn and bloodied. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. I rushed to her side, my heart pounding.
Leela, what happened?
Damien, he found me. He said he was going to make you watch.
Where is he?
I asked, already knowing the answer. Lila opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she went limp in my arms. I heard a noise behind me and whirled around. Damien was standing there, a twisted grin on his face. He held a bloody knife in his hand.
Hello, Ethan. I told you I'd make you watch.
He lunged at me, the knife flashing in the dim light. I tried to dodge, but he was too fast. The blade sliced into my arm, drawing blood. I cried out in pain and stumbled backwards. Damien advanced on me, his eyes wild with rage.
You took everything from me. Now it's my turn.
He raised the knife, ready to strike again. But before he could, a shot rang out. Damien froze, a look of shock on his face. He dropped the knife and crumpled to the floor, a pool of blood spreading around him. I looked up to see a group of police officers standing in the doorway, their guns drawn. One of them rushed to Damien's side, checking for a pulse. Another knelt beside Lila, checking her vitals.
"Ambulance is on the way,"
the officer said, looking up at me.
"You're going to be okay, son."
I nodded, my mind reeling. I looked down at Lila, her face pale and still. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I realized that she was gone. Damien had taken her from me just like he said he would. The ambulance arrived and the paramedics rushed to Lila's side. But it was too late. She was pronounced dead at the scene. I watched in numb silence as they covered her body with a sheet and wheeled her out. Damien was taken into custody, his wounds treated by the paramedics. The police questioned me about what had happened, but I could barely form coherent sentences. I told them everything I knew about Damien's threats and his escape from prison. They assured me that he would be going away for a very long time, but it was little comfort. Lila was gone, and it was all my fault. If I had just convinced her to leave town, to go into hiding, she might still be alive. I quit my job, unable to bear the thought of returning to that place. I moved out of my apartment, unable to stand the memories that haunted every corner. I tried to start over, to rebuild my life, but the guilt and the grief were always there, weighing me down. I still have nightmares about that night, about the look of terror on Lila's face as she died in my arms. I'll never forget the sound of Damien's laughter as he watched the life drain from her eyes. It's a sound that haunts me, a constant reminder of my failure to protect her. I know that Damien is behind bars now, that he can't hurt anyone else, but it doesn't make the pain any easier to bear. Lila was a fighter, a survivor. She didn't deserve to die like that, at the hands of a monster. She deserved so much more. I try to honor her memory by living my life to the fullest, by making the most of every day. But it's hard, knowing that she's gone. I miss her laugh, her smile, her unwavering spirit. She was the bravest person I ever knew, and she was taken from this world far too soon. So I carry on, one day at a time, with Lila's memory as my guide. I know that she would want me to be strong, to keep fighting. And that's what I'll do, for as long as I live. I'll never forget her, and I'll never stop fighting for justice, for her and for all the other victims of violence and cruelty.